Thanks, Jonas. I think you actually did answer the question of what is a circular economy, because I think the pictures and the deconstruction of all the things that we produce and we consume actually makes it come alive for us. I particularly like the deconstruction of the hamburger. It shows how really complex our world is at the moment and how complex the interlocking networks of the supply chain are. So can I just get a show of hands across the room? How many of you have heard of the term circular economy only within the last 12 months? Few of you? Only within the last 5 years? Only within the last 10 years? Couple? We are talking to an extremely enlightened crowd here, which is great. I was at a major waste conference the last couple of days, and you could not get into a single session without hearing the term circular economy mentioned. And that's particularly fascinating because given I went into Google just to search what the origins of the term were, and the very first instance I could find of it was in 2006. And that was in a reference to China's 11th national plan. So it's not actually been around that long, even though there have been previous iterations of the concept way before that. I think this uptake in awareness over the last 5 years in particular, and of course the acceptance of the concept of a circular economy is extremely encouraging. And it's encouraging because in order to operationalize it, we really need the participation of every member of society. So we're not just talking to people like you because it's preaching to the converted. We're actually taking it out to people in the streets as well, because that's the only way in which it will actually work. When we are talking about increased community awareness, this really came through in the engagement that we did a little bit late in last year when we came out with the draft circular economy policy statement. It was quite a short document and we put it out there for comment. We thought it would be great if some people who are interested in the sector come back with some ideas and input. The reality is we were quite overwhelmed with the volume and also the diversity of the responses that we received. So this is a breakdown of the nearly 400 responses that we got to that discussion document, and you can see that the diversity of the respondents is pretty amazing. The one aspect which I think is still a little missing from that piece is the involvement of the individual. So we didn't see a lot of sort of individuals off the street, coming to the EPA website, picking up the document and saying, hi, I want to make a comment on this, but I think that is a natural next step. So we released this draft for public consultation in October 2018. And in it, we spoke about the need to move away from the linear economy, the need to move away from this take, make, and dispose approach that, economies have traditionally embarked on. I think everyone in the room is aware of the issues and the challenges around that, and also the need to move towards a circular economy. So I won't go too deeply into, some of the issues and challenges that we unpacked in that report. But in the responses that we got, there was a very clear message, like this is probably one of the most unifying pieces of feedback that I've gotten in all my years in government. And that feedback was that retaining the status quo in New South Wales was not an option, nor is that sustainable. The world is in transition, we all know that, and New South Wales needs to move along with that. There was also a very clear acceptance and, in fact, positive embracing of New South Wales moving to a circular economy. Where we will sit in that spectrum is a matter that is still up for conversation and discussion, but that's what we're here for. So in February this year, the final statement was released. Again, little brand awareness. Has anyone actually seen this document? A few of you, great. If you haven't, please jump onto our website. I would really encourage you to download it. So the final statement was released. What's in it and how is it to be used? The purpose of it is really to help guide the New South Wales government in its decision-making as we transition towards a circular economy. So this is decision-making both as an employer and as an organization. It's decision-making as a policymaker and an entity that makes decisions that affect the everyday lives of people in the state. It sets out the ambition and also the approach for transitioning towards a circular economy, including, and this is what I'm particularly excited about, including for government to be an early adopter in implementing CE principles across New South Wales. So to do this, we've derived 7 principles that the statement will focus on as part of our ambition. The first is sustainable management of all resources. So this talks about minimizing the consumption of finite resources, as Jonas has talked about just now, replacing raw materials where possible with recovered or recycled products, and obviously that will reduce demand for finite natural resources, minimize environmental impacts, and that sort of thing. The next 3 principles we talk about are around valuing resource productivity, designing out waste and pollution, maintaining the value of products and materials. We have heard just now about the importance of designing things so that their use is maximized in society. But it's not just about products in terms of things that we go out into the shops and buy. It's also about the design of the built environment. It's about the design of cities. It's about the design of infrastructure as well. We need to make things as productively used as possible so that we can, again, minimize the unnecessary waste of resources. And that's where the government actually is a powerful lever, because we are a massive procurer of such products. We are, you know, if anything, the major planner in how cities and communities are built, if not actually the deliverer, but we have a lot of regulatory levers in that regard. So the challenge for us is deciding where across the spectrum of being too prescriptive or too laissez-faire do we sit in order to drive the right incentives towards the circular economy. So state and federal governments are committed to supporting this through both state and national targets, obviously. For example, at the national level, we have a target of 100% packaging being reusable, recyclable or compostable by 2025. Some sectors of business are already moving fast and way ahead of this already. For example, you would have seen Coke announcing that 70% of its packaging will be, of its plastic bottles will be entirely from recycled plastics by the end of this year. So we are quite encouraged by that. The 5th principle talks about innovating new solutions for resource efficiency. So this involves capturing the resources in new ways through innovative business models or innovative technologies. We're talking about, moving sorting away from the traditional ways it's usually been done towards maybe enhanced use of robotics and things like that. Government doesn't tend to be involved in those things. It's a business decision, but there may be levers that we could investigate and talk about in terms of barriers to entry or, removing barriers where there are regulatory impediments to these having greater uptake in the state. And very importantly, obviously, creating circular economy jobs. We need to look at how we can not create jobs for jobs' sake, but use the sustainable economy to make sure that we create sustainable jobs, whether it's in advanced manufacturing, servicing, resource recovery, repair, and refurbishment. And the last one, I think, is probably the most important of all. It's fostering behavior change. Education, awareness, engagement, all of these are really important drivers, not just at the individual level, but they're also important drivers in terms of influencing policy and influencing policy decisions. So one of the things that the EPA has been involved in together in a joint partnership with industry has been working on a project called Project Yellow Sail. It's a fairly small project by government standards, but it's basically the development of an app that helps individuals identify whether a product is recyclable, and if it is, how do you recycle it? And that is slated for a launch sometime in the later part of 2019. So next steps in terms of priority projects, what will happen next? We are looking at some of the key opportunities for implementation of the policy statement. So let's start with how we're embedding CE principles in government procurement. We're now looking actively at how we can use things like crushed recycled glass in government infrastructure procurement. This initiative is led by the RMS. It manages more than 18,000 kilometers of roads in New South Wales, and we're working together with stakeholders to increase the amount of recycled content in the state's roads. The current RMS specifications allows for a maximum of 2.5% of recycled glass to be used in all asphalt pavement layers. Having said that, it's not used to any great extent throughout New South Wales at the moment. So to investigate and encourage the use of this further, RMS is developing a supply chain to provide the quantity and quality of recycled glass that is needed. They're also establishing demonstration projects and case studies to show the benefits and also the standards and specs and the testing regimes involved in this endeavor. The EPA is assisting RMS in this with regulatory and compliance advice and also liaison with industry. Also, Procurement New South Wales is looking at options to improve procurement policies, including developing mandatory minimum ESG standards as part of its tender evaluation criteria. And we're also looking at whole-of-government procurement services contracts in 2019 with a view to building this out further in 2020. In terms of planning initiatives, we have set up a key agency liaison group, or KELG for short. It's led by the Department of Planning with key agencies which are the EPA and Fire and Rescue New South Wales also on the committee. And the intent of this committee is to make it easier and quicker for proponents in the recycling industry to move through the planning process, because we hear that that's where one of the biggest frictions in setting up a recycling business comes up. So we want to engage with them early. We want to have a joined-up approach, which is why all the key agencies are sitting at the same table. We want to help particularly the smaller businesses to prepare better prepared applications so that they can go through the application process a little bit quicker, and also to coordinate responses from the various agencies involved. At the same time, the EPA is also talking to the Greater Sydney Commission to examine opportunities for better waste and circular economy planning in the Western Sydney growth districts. And we are also, on the third point, looking at how we can improve contracting for waste management in New South Wales. This piece of work is being led by both Treasury and EPA. We are looking at what are some of the commercial levers to incentivize better environmental outcomes through local council contracting. And the viability of this approach is being tested at the moment with one inner city council. We are still looking for a regional partner to work with, because the dynamics of waste contracting there are quite different. So if you do know of anyone, put them on to me. And finally, this is the logical next step for the circular economy policy statement. It's going to become a foundational piece that feeds into the EPA's 20-year waste strategy. Why are we doing a 20-year waste strategy? We've historically done planning on a 5-year basis, and the overwhelming feedback that we've heard from industry is that 5 years is not long enough. When you're investing in infrastructure, when you're investing in long-term planning, you need to look way beyond 5 years. This is a 20-year waste strategy with a 40-year outlook. So we are looking far ahead, but that is what industry is calling out for. What it will do is that it will have new 20-year goals for waste generation, resource recovery, and landfill diversion. We'll have new policy positions and strategic directions in relation to waste avoidance and resource recovery. We'll have a plan for improving waste collection and distribution, and also for state waste infrastructure planning. And finally, we are going to have a plan to strengthen data quality and access as well. So we are still in the early stages of scoping out this strategy. The team is in the process of going out far and wide, talking to, and most importantly, listening to stakeholders in terms of what they want and what they expect from government leadership in this regard. So I'd really welcome your views as well. If anyone's interested in providing your input or advice, happy to chat on the sidelines of this meeting, or my email is on the slide. So, thank you.